passion for combining and pairing those unique instruments. And that's a great thing.
So the thing is, there was a producer. In a way, it was a very collaborative. Me and the footage, and you actually talked to it, and you was actually an experiment. Okay, that film was an experiment. At the same time, a very vibrant critical cinema, and they.
Hello and welcome to Campus TV. This is Jahnavi Sahabani reporting from JNC. Today we have here with us Mr. Unni Vijayan.
Hi.
He brings a wealth of experience in editing, filmmaking, directing, and even teaching. Not only has he gained multiple national and international awards through his films, but also he's experienced in being a jury member for national awards. Welcome, sir. We're so honored to have you here today.
you.
Could you share a brief memory that sparked your interest in filmmaking?
For me, my interest in filmmaking does not come from mainstream. This is specifically I should because watching mainstream films from childhood, I was a consumer, and basically I was watching it as a consumer. But it was only during my teenage when I started watching late night films in Doordarshan. They used to show all those very beautiful world cinema late night 11:30, and that is how it started telling me that this is an art form. This is not entertainment. Cinema is not entertainment. Period. And for it, it is an art form, and it has a much larger things to do other than entertaining people.
With your background in philosophy, how did you incorporate it into the filmmaking process with like editing and directing? Sorry.
So, Janvi, interesting question. I don't. If you say, when I studied philosophy, I was not thinking about cinema, and when I studied cinema, I was not thinking about philosophy. Really, no. But it became much later towards the recent times that I've been engaging with it academically, and that's when I realized that philosophy. There is something called philosophy of cinema, of films. So there is a lot of discussion around philosophy being represented in cinema, in films. So different philosophical thoughts have been represented in films. And like if you look at Life of Pi, it is actually a film which it involves Indian philosophy in a very, very, very critical manner. And so it is not just a film, but it is actually a discourse on Indian philosophy. So yeah, I mean that has been interesting me a lot now when I read about it. Yeah.
You've been an editor for a decade, and you also earned like multiple national awards for it. How did your transition from editing to directing happen, and
Yeah.
what motivated you
Interesting.
for it?
So how did I get into editing? A good question because actually I did not know there's something called editing in film. When we see films, it is so seamless, and it is actually an illusion of reality which is spread in front of us. As consumers, we really do not think that it's a fragmented art. But then somebody told me I wanted to make films, but not how and what. So somebody said, better learn a trade which will keep you, really earn you something. So they said, why don't you take editing, which will bring some home. So I took up editing just thinking that it will bring me some living, and I did not realize beyond that. But when I started learning and editing, I realized it's a really beautiful form of art within cinema, wherein you're actually constructing film once again in my own way. So there's a director who has shot it and visualized it, and when the footages come to me, there's nobody in the room. There's no director, there's no screenwriter, nothing. Me and the footage, and you actually talk to it, and you try to see what is the narrative, and you put it together and make your own narrative. Yeah. And there have been times when, and this has happened to many editors, wherein the director comes and sees that, oh, I did not think it was like this. Sometimes they feel upset. They say, no, but this is not what my story is that. Okay, can I have my story? Okay, But sometimes they also say, "Oh, interesting. Let's keep it. I did not think it way, but it looks better." So it is. We are constructing.
How did you? What's the difference between editing your own film and someone else's film? Could you tell us more about the freedoms and challenges that each presents?
Uh, People have different opinions about it, but I very strongly sometimes feel that one should not edit one's own film because I lose that opportunity of a story being constructed once again or interpreted once again. Because I will edit it because I have visualized it, I wrote it, I directed it, and I do it the way it is. So editing doesn't bring another layer to it when I do on my own film. But if there's another editor who steps in, really, I mean, that person puts another layer to the
Fresh perspective.
film. It's a different interpretation that happens. When you talk to Deiraj, whose film was here, he would say that if you ask him, his editor, what it would be a very interesting story he would have.
What motivated your shift from the editing to directing?
See, we all ultimately want to make films and want to, in some way, converse with the audience. That is what we want to do. I'm sure all of you also want to do. That is a thing. So we choose mediums. Sometimes I may choose editing, and the way some people do it through cinematography. People make films. So ultimately, that is the thing. So I felt at some point, editing was not really, satisfying me, and so I wanted to make my own film and did that. But like I was telling you, writing is the most. I ultimately realized that writing is the crux of it all, and also that craft of writing, the art of writing. That is what now I indulge in, and that is what I write. I teach script writing. This is what I feel is very crucial and important for people to actually engage.
Your short film, Veena and Ukulele, won the Best Director Award at OIFFA Awards. What brought upon the motivation for combining and pairing those unique instruments?
That film was an experiment for me to uh, move away from editing. So basically, I wanted to move away my identity as an editor, and so I wanted to do a single shot film, a single shot, and not to edit, and not to talk, and not to communicate through editing as a cinematic role. So I eschewed any forms that editing would bring, any meaning that editing would try to bring, and move to another way of communicating that. So I used a single shot. It's a whole 20-minute long film with one single shot. And I mean, yeah, it's that. I mean, it's happening in two flats, and the camera just moves between them seamlessly and tells the story.
That's a great thing. Lessons in Forgetting has gotten a significant acclaim. So, what inspired that movie, and how did you work with the actors to bring out and portray such complex emotions authentically?
So the thing is, there was a producer. In a way, it was a very collaborative. A lot of people were involved in it. So there was a producer who wanted to do this. There was a Anita Nair as a writer came in with her own script. As a screenwriter, her own story was adapted. And while I was also in as a director and one, so the process, well, it had a, I would say the process was complex in the sense of the production that was it was mounted on. It was quite much. But well, I would say at that time I was still exploring editing, and I had not really uh, moved myself away from editing as a cinematic code, and my explorations were all around that. So you would see the film being constructed also in that way. Uh, the actors, we had fantastic actors, Adil Hussain. So that experience of working with somebody like him was really nice.
You also been a jury member for a lot of national awards. And how was your experience there?
Yeah, so jury, in a way, when you're part of a jury and when you're watching films, you are actually what what we like to see is that how do we see new cinema that is Indian for an Indian context, the new cinema, what is going to develop? How do you want it? In what direction? So you see multiple films, and then you choose something saying that okay, this represents, and we feel that this is the future and not this. Let's not go this way. Let's go that. That is so. It's a very collective decision, but slowly it also is a kind of forming an opinion and a direction for where cinema is headed in the next few years. So juries are very important. They actually nudge the context of that region into what kind of cinema they.
What are your insights on the current trends of Indian cinema?
Oh, so Indian cinema is such a vast and complex thing. India itself is a very complex. I won't say there's one. Different languages, different. So if you say when Indian New Wave is not just one thing. There is a Kannada New Wave. There's a Hindi New Wave. There's a Malayalam New Wave. Everywhere they all developed and they were all conversing with each other. So it's a very complex question in that sense. Where what do we see? But I see that India always constantly had this mainstream, which is a huge chunk of it, and at the same time a very vibrant independent cinema happening. And I feel they never have been together, or that's why the word parallel cinema came up, which is very unique to Indian cinema during the 70s and 80s, which means that it runs parallel. You don't meet again. So we have to feel that mainstream is mainstream, but there's also independent cinema, and we really do not have to work hard for them to mix together. They can survive in their own ways. And so, uh, uh, where is cinema headed? I would say in multiple ways. There's also mainstream doing really well. There's also independent cinema doing really robust and doing well in that senses, and it has to be supported. And yeah, once you start not supporting one, the imbalance happens and it will all collapse.
Has that shifted your perspective in any way? Like, has that make you think, oh, I want to do that, or I'd not try that ever?
Well, so it's very again, if I write mainstream, I teach mainstream. Structured writing is very mainstream. The whole the way you structure film in the 3 act structure and things like that. They are all mainstream and they work well for mainstream. But given that the independent cinema also break it, and it's very interesting to have new forms and to see new forms and to engage with it, not just as a writer, as a filmmaker. And it's very interesting. So, I mean, there are two things also happening at the same time, but you can shift between them, but understanding where you are at the same time.
I have one last question for you. Is there any advice that you'd like to give the budding filmmakers and even storytellers to overcome the challenges that they might be facing, or anything that you'd like to tell them?
Okay, I was talking to you about this, so I have very specific views about this, especially with coming to JNC, which is a Jyoti Nivas, which is an all-women's college. And I always had a very pleasant experience here because I really sincerely feel the time now is to tell feminine stories. It's not, I'm not specifically saying men and women, I'm talking about feminine stories. Okay? Men can tell feminine stories and women can tell masculine stories, but I'm saying feminine stories. And that comes from really heartfelt understanding of the world and engaging around yourself. And that is very important. You should know how to shoot. I mean, you can make a career of being a cinematographer, an editor. You can do all those things, but what is it that you want to tell? And is it? I mean, is that something which is going to impact the world? Is it going to have a new form emerging out of it?
That
This
brought
is
you back
this
to
is what. Yeah.
that brought you back to script writing.
Yeah, in a way, of course, yeah. And I constantly think about it because I also teach and constantly I'm engaging with students, and I feel and I always want to see them engaging with the world and trying to position themselves in some way and belong somewhere.
Thank you so much, sir,
Thank
for
you.
giving
Thank
us
you,
your
Jhanvi.
time today. It's been an honor. Thank you for tuning in. This is Jahnavi Sahabani with video journalist Bhanupriya, Purna, and Sanskriti. Signing off, Campus TV.